with Nemesis, and if you want to give us a little bit of your hypothesis, theory, whatever.
I'll start back in 2003 when I started with Nancy Leiter. I think is it Leiter or Leader? I started with her.
Leader.
I started following the two sons, and I have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of two sons. And then I began looking at webcam shots, and at Mount Wilson in Los Angeles, they had some two-sun photos. They had an extra shiny, bright thing up there next to the moon at night. Now, I have those pictures, too. And so then about 2007, I got seriously into NASA photos, particularly Mars rovers photos. And that's where I did my learning curve and learned how to process hyperdimensional images so you could kind of see all the levels as a multiple exposure and pick out what you want to look at. And so that's when they started talking about this Nibiru phenomenon, as if it was actually going to happen. Something was going to happen. Something happened in 2003. They said that it was here and then it left. And then around 2007, there was a flurry of activity. Particularly, there was a war on Mars, which I documented, and I have all the photos of that. And according to the Yellow Rose for Texas, who's actually, I believe, Ashiana Dean, that's when the old soul sun began deteriorating. The mantle deteriorated, so it wasn't there anymore, and it started cracking. You started seeing a lot of UFOs around it, and the SOHO satellites photos, of course, can be very, very easily photoshopped and altered, and they keep turning off the cameras whenever they don't want you to see something, which just keeps you going because you know there's something to see if they keep turning off the cameers. You know there's something going on. Okay,
so let's say our dear sun soul began up. Any ideas?
That's when it started seriously deteriorating, that you could actually see that. And I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of SOHO images, too, the EITs, 171s through 304s, and the C2 and the C3. I was taking those pictures every day for years. And so I was slowly watching the sun deteriorate, and I knew that that's what's happening. Well, then the comets started coming through, and there was this one called Hartley 2, and I just roared with laughter because it was very easy to show with my digital skills that it's a large protuberance on a flat surface, and there's a lake in front of it, Okay, so Hartley 2 was a protuberance on an unknown sphere somewhere out there on its way toward us. I thought that was interesting. And then there was Elenin, and on September 25th, 2011, quote, comet Elenin, actually got between our planet Earth and the sun. It came between us. And I began to suspect that was a very important thing to happen, because after that the changes began. The people on YouTube were screaming that the moon didn't look right. The moon looked funny. It was too bright. It was the wrong color, and it had too many colors, and it was doing all these weird things. And I thought, okay, well then something fundamental has happened. So I began to piece it together, and then I ran into some graphics that showed me, because somebody let them out who wasn't supposed to let them out, what was actually going on. And so what happened? At the point where Elenin peeled us out of Old Soul's orbit, this Nibiru thing, when NASA was taking pictures of it as they were flying around it in 2003, 2006, 2007. It was a sphere-shaped, and it had this donut hole in it, which means it's actually a toroid. It's a toroid, and it's flexible, and it can be larger or smaller. It can be as big as an inner tube, or it can be as little as a sphere, just depending on what shape it has. Its bus drivers or whoever runs the thing decide to make it that week. So what I saw happening was that toroid, that inner tube, has wrapped around our atmosphere. And the scripture that says, and I follow everything with scriptures, there was an expanse between the waters and the waters, okay? And there were the waters that were on the earth, and there were the waters that were above the expanse. Okay, and that's an example of a time when the toroid is wrapped around our planet. Apparently, it has wrapped around this planet 19 times. And the reason I say 19 times is because the engineer that describes what has happened to Yellowstone, it has blown its top 19 times. And it has blown its top every 26,000 years, 19 times. And so it seems that whenever Nibiru wraps around this planet, and because it's a UV dark matter planet, it's very hot, which is why Al Gore says our planet is heating up. But it's only heating up around the equator. You'll notice are the poles of Earth have been freezing more solid even in summer every year. The pole ice is increasing, and the heat around the middle is increasing, and that's why we're getting the much more extreme weather. Okay, so then I found a diagram that somebody let loose that actually showed the Earth in the center and our atmosphere, which is called a firmament now, and the toroid around the outside, and on the inner lip of the toroid, there's a little sun. It's a little artificial sun. And on the other side of the toroid, there's the brown dwarf star Nemesis. So that particular graphic is the one that I'm using now to explain why our planet is now in a solar cluster with Wormwood and Nemesis, and we're dropping straight south. We're headed for the Orion Nebula, because that is the origin of Nibiru, is the Orion Nebula. That's where Nibiru comes from, according to its own history and the history of the Anunnaki. Okay,
Isn't that what Dawn and Denise said on Friday's show, Bob?
I think she was very close to that, yes.
Okay, we're having to arrive at this without any help from NASA or astronomers, and I think we're doing a pretty good job, frankly.
Amazing. Wow. So what else would you like to share before we give the ball to Bob?
Well, I'm not sure where to go now, so why don't you give the ball to Bob?
Yeah. Take it away, Bob, for another 5-10 minutes, and then we'll be back again.
Sure. You know, I've been working with Denise Chavez and Don Hull, and they've just been laying all this stuff out, taking the photographs for the last almost daily, showing this thing is just getting closer and closer, where their cameras can actually pick it up. Dawn has a couple of infrared cameras, and she's just doing a fantastic job. The only thing I can talk about is just ancient history, that this thing had been here before. The ancient Egyptians had to deal with it back then, laying down the very close exact time for when the Exodus, for all those who know the Exodus in the Bible, there's an Egyptian version of it. His name was Ippawar, and in his account he tells how all the people were leaving Egypt while the destroyer, which is the ancient Egyptian name before Nibiru is in the sky for almost 10 days. He talks about Pharaoh coming after him. Pharaoh was actually a Hyksos pharaoh. Hyksos ruled Upper Egypt roughly from the 12th Egyptian dynasty to the end of the 17th. And during that same time, in the account, they heard a massive roar that was louder than anything they'd ever heard before. That was the ancient island of Thera up in Greece. Now it's called Santorini. So that lays down the time period roughly between 1558 and 1600 BC for the last visit of Nibiru, the destroyer, or wormwood, as a lot of people are getting to know it. A lot of we're finding a lot of these ancient documents. Anyone that wants to do a Google search for Ipuwer, IPUWER, you'll find on every single account, this sounds just like the 9 plagues of Egypt or the Exodus. No, it is not. This is just the Kolbrin.com, Kolbrin, they have the accounts which have not been cleansed of a lot of words. During Ipuwer's account, he tells about the destroyer doing this, and this. On the internet, the destroyer is never mentioned. During his account, he mentions that the earth felt like a potter's wheel full of clay tipping over. It's not mentioned on the internet. It's all been cleansed. See, President Eisenhower has known about this stuff since at least 1954, 1955. So all the records have been cleansed, so no one can ever see what the original ancient documents were saying. And all this stuff is finally coming out. The Chinese with Mozai, M-O-Z-I, his book 5, he talks about this happening. And here's a weird name for everyone out there. Emperor Yahoo. Y-A-H-O-U. He was an ancient Chinese emperor sometime in the early 2000 BCs. I've laid it down closer to 12,900, where the flood of Noah possibly happened. But during his account, the water topped the high mountains of China. Just imagine that you're watching the movie 2012. Here's this poor monk. He's up in up on the top of his thing, and here's the water coming over the Himalayas. And that's exactly
24,000 feet.
Well, in the movie, it was 1530 something meters, which came out to a little bit over 6,000 feet in height.
Wait a minute. So 15,000 meters times 3 feet is 45,000 feet.
Okay, 45,000. Wow. I'm sorry. Yeah. So and in the account, he tells where it took him 13 years to drain all the salt water from the high mountain valleys back down to the rivers. And then he had to send 4 teams out to find out where north, south, east, west were.
Yes, because it turns about 90 degrees each time.
Yeah, where there had been a geological pole shift. And all the stars had shifted positions, the sun, the moon. Ipuwer says the same thing after the Exodus, that all the stars went to different positions, the sun, the moon went to different positions.
So we have to recalendar, because none of our calendars are going to work, and we're not going to know where we are in the season.
Exactly. So, depending upon what the ETs are trying to help us with now, will this same thing happen? I'm hoping not. I think that's the reason why they're doing it, so that we modern humans, with our advanced technology and our space flight capabilities, will still be here. I mean, for anyone who's ever looked into the Georgia Guidestones, these 13-foot something tall